The blood-red sun hung low over the jagged horizon as Finn Blackwood dragged the shovel across the hard Wyoming earth. His broad shoulders slumped with a weight heavier than any physical burden. 6 feet of disturbed soil marked the spot where he had just buried his heart alongside his wife's body, the crude wooden cross bearing her name, Sarah Blackwood, the only evidence that she had ever existed in this harsh frontier. Wyoming Territory, 1875. Finn had been working his small cattle ranch outside of Promise Creek for nearly 8 years, building a life with Sarah that had been cut tragically short by a fever that swept through the territory like wildfire. 3 days of delirium and pain, and she was gone, leaving nothing but silence in the cabin they had built with their own hands. "Never again," he whispered to the setting sun, his voice rough from days without speaking to another soul. "I swear it, Sarah, never again." The ranch hands kept their distance as Finn threw himself into work with a fervor that bordered on madness. Dawn until dusk, he drove himself and his men harder than ever before, expanding his herd, fixing fences, and taking on tasks that would have required 3 men. When darkness fell, he would retreat to his cabin, a bottle of whiskey his only companion. Mr. Blackwood's gone plumb crazy with grief. Finn overheard one of his ranch hands say to another as they sat around the evening fire, unaware of his presence just beyond the circle of light. "Can't blame him none," replied another. "Miss Sarah was an angel if I ever saw one. Man ain't meant to lose a woman like that and keep his wits." Finn melted back into the darkness, their words confirming what he already knew. He was half a man now, and that half wasn't worth much. Spring turned to summer and summer to fall. The first anniversary of Sarah's death came and went, marked only by a fresh bouquet of wildflowers on her grave and an empty whiskey bottle tossed into the creek. Finn functioned, but he did not live. The townsfolk of Promise Creek learned to leave him be, to expect only the bare minimum of interaction when he came to town for supplies. Until the day the stagecoach arrived, carrying Katherine Reed and her 5-year-old daughter Lily. The dust from the stagecoach wheels had barely settled when Finn first laid eyes on her. He was loading supplies into his wagon outside Hanson's General Store when the commotion drew his attention. The monthly stagecoach always brought some excitement to Promise Creek, but today seemed different. People were gathering, voices hushed with concern. "Poor thing," Mrs. Hanson said, clutching her handkerchief. "To come all this way only to find—" Finn wouldn't have paid any more attention, except that the woman who stepped down from the stagecoach looked as lost as he felt inside. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet, her dress simple but well made. In her arms, she held a sleeping child, no more than 5 or 6 years old, the girl's face buried against her mother's shoulder. "I don't understand," the woman was saying to Sheriff Mills, her voice steady despite the confusion in her eyes. "My brother's letter said he had work for me here, that he had a place for us to stay." The sheriff removed his hat, turning it uncomfortably in his hands. "I'm mighty sorry, madam, but your brother Thomas Carlton passed on 3 weeks ago. Caught in a flash flood while crossing Miller's Creek. We sent word back east, but I reckon it didn't reach you in time." Finn watched as the woman's composure momentarily cracked, her free hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. The child in her arms stirred, and immediately the woman's expression smoothed over, a mask of calm sliding into place for her daughter's benefit. "I see," she said simply, though the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Is there a hotel where my daughter and I might stay while I determine our next steps?" Mrs. Hanson stepped forward. "The boarding house has a room, Mrs. Reed, Katherine Reed, and this is my daughter, Lily." Finn found himself unable to look away as the small party moved toward the boarding house. There was something in the set of Katherine Reed's shoulders, in the careful way she protected her child from the harsh reality of their situation, that struck a chord within him. He recognized the look of someone whose world had been upended, who was carrying on not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Shaking his head to clear it, Finn turned back to his wagon. It was none of his concern. He had his own troubles, his own ghosts. The last thing he needed was to get tangled up in someone else's misfortune. Yet, as he drove his wagon back to his ranch that evening, He couldn't help but think of the widow and her child, alone in a strange town with no family, no connections, and likely little money. It was a dangerous position for a woman to be in, especially in a frontier town like Promise Creek. "Not your problem, Blackwood," he muttered to himself as his horse plodded along the familiar trail. "Not your problem at all." But 3 days later, when he saw Katherine Reed step out of the milliner's shop where she had apparently found temporary work, her daughter skipping alongside her, something compelled him to tip his hat in acknowledgement as they passed on the boardwalk. "Madam," he said, the word feeling strange on his tongue after so many months of near silence. Katherine paused, studying him with clear, intelligent eyes. "Good afternoon, Mr. Blackwood, Finn Blackwood, Mr. Blackwood," she repeated with a polite nod. "I'm Katherine Reed, and this is Lily." The little girl peered up at him, her blue eyes wide with childish curiosity. "You're very tall," she announced, earning a gentle admonishment from her mother. "Lily, that's not polite." "It's all right," Finn said, surprising himself with a hint of a smile. "She's not wrong." Katherine returned his smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Up close, Finn could see the weariness in her face, the strain of her circumstances etched in the fine lines around her mouth. "Well, we shouldn't keep you, Mr. Blackwood. Good day." She moved to continue down the boardwalk, but Finn found himself speaking again. "Mrs. Reed, I heard about your brother. I'm sorry for your loss." Katherine stopped, her hand tightening slightly around Lily's. "Thank you, it was unexpected, but we'll manage." The quiet determination in her voice reminded Finn painfully of Sarah, of the way she had faced every hardship of frontier life with the same resolute attitude. It was that memory, perhaps, that prompted his next words. "I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles outside town. I've been meaning to hire someone to help with the housekeeping and cooking for the hands." It was a lie. He had been doing without such help since Sarah died, unable to bear the thought of someone else in her kitchen. "If you're interested, there's a small cabin on the property where you and your daughter could stay." Katherine's expression revealed her surprise, followed swiftly by wariness. "That's very kind, Mr. Blackwood, but I couldn't possibly. It's not charity, Mrs. Reed," Finn interrupted, knowing instinctively that pride would not allow her to accept a handout. "It's a fair wage for honest work, and I reckon your daughter might prefer the open space to being cooped up in town." At the mention of her daughter, Katherine glanced down at Lily, who was now watching a stray dog across the street with rapt attention. When she looked back at Finn, there was a calculating look in her eyes, weighing options, considering risks. "May I think about it?" she finally asked. Finn nodded. "I'll be in town again on Friday for supplies. You can let me know then." As he walked away, Finn couldn't fathom what had possessed him to make such an offer. The idea of strangers in his home, in the spaces that still held Sarah's memory, made his chest tight with something close to panic. Yet he didn't take back the offer, and when Friday came, he found himself scanning the street for Katherine Reed with an anticipation he hadn't felt in over a year. He found her waiting outside Hanson's store, her hands clasped tightly before her. Lily was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him, her voice composed but tentative. "I've considered your offer." Finn waited, suddenly unsure which answer he was hoping for. "If it still stands, I would like to accept," Katherine continued. "However, I have some conditions." Finn raised an eyebrow but nodded for her to continue. "I want to be clear that this is a business arrangement. I will cook, clean, and manage your household affairs, but I expect to be treated with respect and given appropriate privacy for myself and my daughter." "Of course," Finn agreed, slightly taken aback by her directness. "And I would like to know more about you, Mr. Blackwood." "My daughter's safety is my primary concern, and while Sheriff Mills speaks highly of you, I need to be certain we're not walking into a situation that could be problematic." Finn couldn't help but admire her caution. Too many women on the frontier found themselves in desperate circumstances because they had trusted too easily. "Ask whatever you like, Mrs. Reed." Katherine studied him for a moment. "Are you married, Mr. Blackwood?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "I was," he answered, his voice rough. "My wife, Sarah, died last year, fever." Something softened in Katherine's expression. "I'm sorry for your loss. I know how difficult it can be." Finn nodded, unable to speak further on the subject. "And your husband?" he asked, changing the focus. "James died at Gettysburg," she replied, a shadow crossing her face. "Lily was just a baby. She doesn't remember him." The war between the states had ended a decade ago, but its echoes still reverberated through countless lives. Finn had been too young to fight, but he had lost an older brother to the conflict. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Katherine acknowledged his sympathy with a slight inclination of her head. "When can we start?" "Tomorrow, if that suits you. I'll bring the wagon around at 9. And so it was agreed. Finn spent a restless night, alternating between second-guessing his decision and cleaning Sarah's belongings from the small cabin that would house Katherine and Lily. It was a practical thing to do. The widow and her child needed the space more than the ghosts that haunted him, but each item he packed away felt like another betrayal. By morning, Finn had worked himself into a dark mood, snapping at his ranch hands and nearly kicking over a milk pail when one of the cows got ornery during milking. The ride into town did little to improve his temperament, and he arrived at the boarding house with a scowl etched into his features. Katherine and Lily were waiting on the porch, their meager belongings packed into 2 worn carpet bags. Lily bounced excitedly at the sight of the wagon, but Katherine's smile faltered slightly when she caught sight of Finn's expression. "Good morning, mister." "Blackwood," she said cautiously as he climbed down from the wagon. Finn forced himself to smooth his features. "Mrs. Reed, are you ready?" "Yes, we don't have much." Finn loaded their bags into the wagon, then helped Lily up onto the seat. The child's enthusiasm was infectious. Her questions about the ranch, the animals, and whether there might be other children to play with coming in a steady stream that required little response beyond the occasional nod or monosyllabic answer. Katherine, however, seemed to sense his mood and maintained a respectful silence for much of the journey, only speaking to gentle her daughter's exuberance when it threatened to become overwhelming. "It's beautiful country," she commented as they crested a hill that provided a sweeping view of the valley where Finn's ranch sprawled. The main house, barn, and outbuildings formed a neat cluster, with fenced pastures stretching out toward the distant mountains. "It is," Finn agreed, feeling some of his tension ease as he looked out over the land he had worked so hard to tame. "My wife and I came here with nothing but a wagon of supplies and a dream. Took us 3 years to build the main house. You built it yourselves." Katherine asked, genuine admiration in her voice. "With some help from neighbors," Finn admitted. "That's how it is out here. You help others, they help you." "A fine principle," Katherine said softly. "One I hope to teach Lily." As they approached the ranch, Finn's ranch hands emerged from the barn and bunkhouse, curious about the newcomers. Finn made brief introductions, watching with a mixture of amusement and unease as his normally rough-mannered cowboys suddenly remembered their manners in the presence of a lady. "Mrs. Reed will be taking over the cooking and housekeeping," Finn explained to the assembled men. "I expect you all to show her and her daughter the same respect you'd show your own mothers and sisters." A chorus of "Yes, boss," and "Yes, sir" followed this pronouncement, along with a few appreciative glances that Finn found himself unreasonably irritated by. "Jake, help Mrs. Reed get settled in the north cabin," Finn instructed his foreman. "I need to check on that new fence line." Without waiting for a response, Finn turned his horse and rode off, needing some distance to reconcile himself to the changes he had invited into his carefully isolated existence. He spent the remainder of the day far from the main house, returning only after sunset when he was certain Katherine and Lily would be settled in their cabin. The next morning, however, brought an unexpected surprise. As Finn stepped onto his porch at dawn, he found a covered plate waiting for him, still warm to the touch. Beneath the cloth was a stack of perfectly golden flapjacks, accompanied by a folded note in a neat, feminine hand. "Mr. Blackwood, I hope these meet with your approval. Lily and I will begin work on the main house after breakfast. K. Reed." Finn stared at the plate for a long moment, then carried it inside. The flapjacks were delicious, light and fluffy in a way he hadn't tasted since Sarah's passing. He had been subsisting on the basic fare he could manage himself, supplemented by the rudimentary cooking of whichever ranch hand drew the short straw for kitchen duty. True to her word, Katherine arrived at the main house shortly after breakfast, Lily in tow. The little girl had a small cloth doll clutched in one hand and a determined expression that matched her mother's. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Katherine greeted him, her tone professional but warm. "I thought we would start with a thorough cleaning of the kitchen and pantry, if that's agreeable to you." Finn nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with the idea of this woman organizing his home, touching Sarah's things, changing the way things had been. "Do whatever you think best. I'll be out with the herd most of the day." Katherine's eyes flickered briefly to the living room beyond, where dust had gathered on the mantel and bookshelves, and dishes from previous meals were stacked haphazardly on every surface. If she was dismayed by the state of the house, she didn't show it. "Very well. Will you be returning for the midday meal?" "No," Finn said quickly. "Don't trouble yourself, I'll take something with me." Katherine simply nodded, already rolling up her sleeves. "Lily, why don't you sit at the table and draw some pictures while I get started?" Finn escaped the house, relieved to return to the familiar routine of ranch work. Throughout the day, however, he found his thoughts repeatedly returning to the widow and her daughter. Were they comfortable? Did they have everything they needed? Was Lily bored, or had she found ways to amuse herself? When he finally returned to the ranch in the evening, the transformation of his home stopped him in his tracks. The windows gleamed in the setting sun, the porch had been swept clean, and a faint smell of something delicious wafted through the open door. Inside, the change was even more dramatic. The layers of dust and neglect had been scrubbed away, the dishes washed and put away, and a vase of wildflowers sat on the now polished dining table. Katherine emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, Mr. Blackwood, I wasn't sure when to expect you." "Dinner will be ready shortly." Finn stood awkwardly in his own home, feeling like an intruder. "You didn't have to do all this. It's what you hired me for," Katherine reminded him gently. "Is something wrong?" Finn struggled to articulate the riot of emotions this transformation had triggered. The house looked alive again, cared for in a way it hadn't been since Sarah's death. It should have been a relief, but instead he felt a stab of guilt, as if by allowing these changes, he was somehow erasing Sarah's presence. "No," he finally managed. "You've done a fine job." "I just wasn't expecting so much," Katherine supplied when he trailed off. "I'm afraid once I start something, I find it difficult to leave it half done." Before Finn could respond, Lily bounded into the room, her face lighting up at the sight of him. "Mr. Blackwood, I helped clean. And I saw a rabbit outside, and Mama said maybe we can plant flowers, and can I see the horses tomorrow?" The little girl's excitement was a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere that had pervaded the house for so long. Despite himself, Finn felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. "I suppose that could be arranged," he said, earning a beaming smile from Lily. "Lily, remember what we discussed about indoor voices," Katherine gently admonished her daughter. To Finn, she added, "I hope you don't mind, but I used some of the vegetables from your garden for tonight's stew. It should be ready in about 10 minutes. Finn hesitated. He had been planning to eat alone on the porch, as had become his habit. The thought of sharing a meal at the table where he and Sarah had once sat together was almost unbearable. Katherine seemed to sense his discomfort. "I can bring a tray to your porch if you prefer to eat outside," she offered quietly, while Lily had become distracted by something outside the window. The understanding in her eyes, free from judgment or pity, loosened something in Finn's chest. "That would be, thank you." That evening, as Finn sat on his porch watching the sunset and eating the most flavorful stew he'd had in a year, he observed Katherine and Lily walking back to their cabin. The little girl skipped ahead, chattering animatedly, while her mother followed at a more measured pace, her posture betraying the fatigue of a day's hard work. Finn found himself wondering about their story, about what had driven Katherine to bring her daughter all the way to Wyoming on nothing more than her brother's promise of work. It spoke of desperation, of limited options, yet she carried herself with a dignity that suggested she was accustomed to better circumstances. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Katherine would arrive at the main house early each morning, often leaving breakfast for Finn before he even rose. She worked tirelessly throughout the day, transforming the neglected house into a home once more, while also preparing meals for Finn and the ranch hands that had them singing her praises. Lily, meanwhile, had become the unexpected joy of the ranch. The hardened cowboys melted under her innocent questions and eagerness to help with the easy chores. Even Jake, Finn's taciturn foreman, had been caught showing the little girl how to braid a horse's mane, his weathered face softened by a rare smile. Finn maintained his distance at first, retreating to the solitude of the range whenever possible. But as May turned to June, he found himself lingering longer at the house, finding excuses to return earlier in the day. He told himself it was to check on how Katherine was settling in, to ensure she had everything she needed to do her job effectively. But the truth was, the house felt different now, warmer, somehow less haunted by memories that cut like knives. One evening, as a summer thunderstorm rolled across the plains, Finn was startled by a knock at his door. He opened it to find Lily standing there, her eyes wide with fear, clutching her cloth doll tightly. "Mama said not to bother you," she said in a small voice, "but I'm scared of the thunder, and our roof is leaking, and Mama is trying to catch the water in pots, but it's coming in too fast." Concern immediately overrode Finn's usual reserve. "Show me," he said, grabbing his slicker from the peg by the door. They hurried through the downpour to the small cabin where Katherine was indeed placing pots and buckets under multiple leaks in the roof. She looked up in surprise as Finn entered, rain dripping from his hat. "Mr. Blackwood." "I'm so sorry, Lily shouldn't have. I'll get Jake and the boys," Finn interrupted, already moving back toward the door. "We'll get some tarps up there until the storm passes, then fix it properly tomorrow." Within minutes, Finn had roused several of his hands, and despite the driving rain, they managed to secure tarps over the worst of the leaks. By the time they finished, however, Katherine and Lily's bedding was soaked, and puddles covered much of the floor. "You can't stay here tonight," Finn said, surveying the damage. "There's a spare room in the main house. You'll stay there until we get this fixed." Katherine looked ready to protest, but a particularly loud crack of thunder made Lily whimper and burrow against her skirts. "Thank you," she conceded. "Just for tonight." Back at the main house, Finn showed them to the guest room, a room that had never been used, as he and Sarah had never had the chance to host family or friends from back east as they had planned. Katherine helped Lily change into a dry nightgown, then tucked her into the bed before coming back out to where Finn waited in the hallway. "I can't thank you enough," she said quietly. "You've been more than fair to us, Mr. Blackwood." "Finn," he said abruptly, surprising himself. "You might as well call me Finn." Katherine's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "Finn, then, and I'm Katherine, though most people call me Kate." "Kate," he repeated, testing the name. It suited her, he thought, straightforward and unpretentious, like the woman herself. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the patter of rain against the windows and the occasional rumble of thunder now moving away. "Your daughter," Finn said finally. "She's a good child." Kate's face softened with pride and love. "She is. She's had to be so brave with all the changes in her young life. Sometimes I forget she's only 5, the way she tries to be strong for my sake. She reminds me." Finn began, then stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Of your wife," Kate guessed gently. Finn shook his head. "Of the child Sarah and I never had the chance to have," he admitted, the confession pulled from some deep place he had locked away. "She was with child when the fever took her, 4 months along." Kate's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with sympathy. "Oh, Finn, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." The raw compassion in her voice nearly undid him. Finn turned away, bracing one hand against the wall as he fought for composure. "It was a long time ago." "Not so long," Kate said softly. "Grief doesn't keep a calendar." Her words, so simple yet so profound, unlocked something in Finn's chest. Before he could respond, however, Lily called out from the bedroom, her voice small with lingering fear from the storm. "I should go to her," Kate said, hesitating as if she wanted to say more but unsure if she should. Finn nodded, grateful for the interruption that spared him from continuing a conversation that threatened to expose wounds he had worked so hard to keep hidden. "Good night, Kate." "Good night, Finn." As he lay in his bed that night, listening to the rain against the roof and the occasional murmur of Kate's voice as she soothed Lily back to sleep. Finn was struck by how different his house felt with them in it. For the first time in over a year, the silence didn't press in on him like a physical weight. Instead, there was a sense of, not quite peace, but perhaps the possibility of it. The next morning, Finn and his men repaired the cabin roof, reinforcing it against future storms. Kate insisted on returning to the cabin that night, despite Finn's assurance that they were welcome to stay in the main house until they were certain the repairs would hold. "It's important that Lily and I maintain our own space," Kate explained, her tone gentle but firm. "But thank you for the offer." Finn understood her need for independence, even as he found himself unexpectedly reluctant to see them return to the cabin. The house seemed emptier somehow after they left, the silence no longer comfortable but once again oppressive. June melted into July, bringing with it scorching heat that dried the land and tested both men and cattle. Kate proved herself invaluable during this difficult period, rising before dawn to prepare hearty breakfasts for the ranch hands, and keeping cool water and lemonade ready for the men when they returned from long days in the blistering sun. Finn, meanwhile, found himself spending more time at the house, often sitting on the porch in the evenings while Lily regaled him with stories of her day's adventures. The little girl had taken to following Jake around, helping with his chores and collecting interesting rocks and feathers to present to her mother and, increasingly, to Finn. "Mr. Finn, look what I found by the creek," Lily exclaimed one evening, running up to the porch with something clutched carefully in her small hands. "Jake says it's an arrowhead from real Indians." Finn examined the chipped stone point the child had discovered. "He's right. Probably Cheyenne from the look of it. That's a special find, Lily." The little girl beamed at his approval. "Can I keep it?" "I reckon you should," Finn agreed, handing it back to her. "Just be careful with it. It's a piece of history." From the doorway, Kate watched the interaction with a small smile. "Lily, it's time for your bath. Say good night to Mr. Blackwood." "Good night, Mr. Finn," Lily chirped, impulsively throwing her arms around his waist in a quick hug before scampering inside. Finn sat frozen for a moment, startled by the child's affectionate gesture. It had been so long since anyone had touched him with such uncomplicated warmth that he hardly knew how to respond. Kate approached the porch, an apologetic look on her face. "I'm sorry if she's being too familiar. I can speak to her about respecting your personal space." Finn shook his head. "No need, she's just being a child." After a pause, he added, "It's nice." Kate studied him for a moment, then sat down in the chair beside him, smoothing her skirts. "You're good with her. Not everyone has patience for a 5-year-old's endless questions and energy." "She's easy to be around," Finn said simply. "Honest in a way adults rarely are." "That's true," Kate agreed with a soft laugh. "Sometimes alarmingly so. She asked Mrs. Hanson why her face was so wrinkly last week. I nearly died of embarrassment." The image made Finn chuckle, a rusty sound that surprised them both. Kate's eyes widened slightly, then crinkled at the corners as she smiled. "You should do that more often," she said quietly. "What?" "Laugh. It suits you." Before Finn could respond, Kate rose from her chair. "I should see to Lily's bath. Good night, Finn." As she disappeared into the house, Finn remained on the porch, staring out at the darkening sky. When had it happened, he wondered, this shift from employer and employee to something that felt almost like friendship? And why did the idea not terrify him as it once might have? The following Sunday, Kate approached Finn with a request. "I was hoping to attend church services in town tomorrow," she said as she poured him a cup of coffee. "Lily has been asking questions about God, and I think it would be good for her to experience worship with other children." Finn nodded. "Of course, you can take the small wagon." Kate hesitated. "Actually, I was wondering if you might consider joining us. The men speak highly of Reverend Taylor, and it would be nice for Lily and me to arrive with someone familiar." The request caught Finn off guard. He hadn't set foot in Promise Creek's small church since Sarah's funeral, unable to reconcile the God he had once believed in with the cruel fate that had taken his wife and unborn child. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said stiffly. Kate's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes dimmed slightly. I understand, it was just a thought. She turned to go, but Finn found himself speaking again. It's not that I don't want to escort you, it's just that I haven't been back there since. Since your wife's funeral, Kate finished for him, her voice soft with understanding. I should have realized. Please forgive me for asking. Nothing to forgive, Finn said gruffly. Perhaps another time. Kate nodded, not pressing the issue, and Finn was grateful for her sensitivity. Yet later that evening, as he sat alone in his study, he found himself thinking about her request and his refusal. Was he being a coward, avoiding a place that held painful memories? Or was he simply protecting himself from wounds that might never fully heal? The next morning, Finn surprised himself by rising earlier than usual and putting on his good suit, the one he hadn't worn since that terrible day when they laid Sarah to rest. He was waiting on the porch when Kate and Lily emerged from their cabin, both dressed in their Sunday best. Kate stopped short when she saw him, confusion and then pleasure crossing her face. Finn. Thought I might join you after all, he said, trying to sound casual despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. If the offer still stands. Of course it does, Kate assured him, her smile warming something inside him that had been cold for too long. We'd be honored. The ride into town was filled with Lily's excited chatter about seeing her new friends from town, and the new ribbons Kate had braided into her hair that morning. Finn found himself relaxing as the miles passed, drawn out of his own thoughts by the child's infectious enthusiasm. Promise Creek's church was a simple white clapboard building with a modest steeple, built 5 years earlier by the combined efforts of the townspeople. As Finn helped Kate and Lily down from the wagon, he was acutely aware of the curious glances cast their way. It had been so long since he had participated in any community gathering that his presence alone would have caused a stir. Arriving with the widow, Reed and her daughter was sure to set tongues wagging. Kate seemed to sense his discomfort. We can sit near the back, she suggested quietly as they approached the church steps. Finn appreciated her consideration but squared his shoulders. No need, I'm not hiding. Inside, the church was already filling with families dressed in their Sunday best. Finn guided Kate and Lily to a pew about halfway up the aisle, nodding stiffly to those who greeted him with varying degrees of surprise. Mrs. Hanson hurried over to welcome Kate and compliment Lily on her pretty dress, while Sheriff Mills clapped Finn on the shoulder with a quiet, "Good to see you here, Blackwood." As the service began, Finn found his attention divided between Reverend Taylor's sermon on healing and the woman and child seated beside him. Kate followed the service with quiet reverence, occasionally helping Lily find her place in the hymnal or gently shushing her when the child's whispers grew too loud. There was something deeply familiar about these small maternal gestures, reminding Finn of his own mother's patient guidance during church services of his childhood. When the congregation rose to sing, Lily slipped her small hand into Finn's, looking up at him with a bright smile as she swung their joined hands in time to the music. The simple gesture of trust caught Finn off guard, and he glanced at Kate to find her watching them, a soft expression in her eyes that made his heart skip a beat. After the service, many of the congregation lingered to socialize, and Finn found himself drawn into conversations he would have avoided just months earlier. Several of the ranchers' wives made a point of complimenting Kate on Lily's manners, while the men engaged Finn in discussions about cattle prices and the prospects for rain. "You've made quite an impression," Finn remarked to Kate as they finally made their way back to the wagon. "Half the women in town are wondering how you've managed to civilize Finn Blackwood enough to attend church." Kate laughed, the sound light and musical in the summer air. "And the other half?" "The other half are wondering if you've bewitched me," Finn said, surprising himself with the teasing note in his voice. Kate's cheeks colored slightly, but her eyes danced with amusement. "And have I bewitched you?" The question hung between them, deceptively casual yet laden with potential meaning. Before Finn could formulate a response, Lily tugged at Kate's skirt, asking if they could visit the general store for peppermint sticks. "Perhaps next time," Kate told her daughter, breaking the moment. "We should get back to the ranch." The ride home was quieter, with Lily dozing against her mother's side, tired from the excitement of the morning. Finn found himself stealing glances at Kate's profile, struck by the gentle curve of her cheek, the stray tendril of hair that had escaped her bonnet to curl against her neck. "Thank you for coming with us today," Kate said as they neared the ranch. "I know it wasn't easy for you." Finn considered this. "It was easier than I expected," he admitted. "Having you and Lily there, it helped." Kate's eyes met his, warm with understanding. "Sometimes the hardest step is just walking through the door. Everything after that gets a little easier." Her words stayed with Finn long after they had returned to the ranch, echoing in his mind as he went about his evening chores. There was wisdom in them, a hard-earned insight that spoke of Kate's own journey through grief and recovery. That night, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Finn dreamed not of Sarah's death but of her life, of her laughter as they danced at their wedding, of her fierce determination as they built their home, of her gentle touch as she tended to a calf born too early. He woke with tears on his cheeks, but they were not entirely tears of sorrow. As July gave way to August, bringing with it the backbreaking work of the first hay cutting, Finn found himself increasingly drawn to Kate's company. Their conversations, once limited to household matters and Lily's welfare, gradually expanded to include their pasts, their hopes, and occasionally, their losses. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Lily chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, Kate spoke of her life before Promise Creek. "James and I had a small farm in Pennsylvania," she said, her fingers busy with the mending in her lap. "Nothing grand, but it was ours. After he died at Gettysburg, I tried to keep it going, but..." She trailed off, her needle pausing in its rhythmic movement. "There was a mortgage. The bank was patient at first. The banker's son had served with James, but eventually they needed their money. I sold everything except what would fit in 2 trunks, and we went to live with my brother in Ohio." "That must have been difficult," Finn said, watching her profile in the fading light. Kate's smile was tinged with sadness. "It was. Thomas did his best, but he was a bachelor, not used to having a woman and child in his home. When he wrote about coming west, about the opportunities here in Wyoming, it seemed like a chance for a fresh start." "And then he was gone too," Finn said quietly. Kate nodded, her eyes fixed on Lily's darting form in the yard. "Sometimes I think fate has a cruel sense of humor, or perhaps it's just testing us to see how much we can bear before we break." "You haven't broken," Finn observed. "Neither have you," Kate replied, turning to meet his gaze directly. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared resilience, of wounds that were slowly healing. Finn found himself wanting to reach for her hand, to offer comfort and connection, but Lily chose that moment to run up to the porch, proudly displaying the fireflies she had captured in a glass jar. The moment passed, but its impact lingered. In the days that followed, Finn found himself seeking out Kate's company more frequently, finding excuses to be at the house when she was working, taking his meals at the table rather than on the porch. The ranch hands exchanged knowing glances, but were wise enough to keep their observations to themselves. Late August brought the county fair to Promise Creek, an annual event that drew ranchers and townspeople from miles around for competitions, socializing, and entertainment. Finn had avoided the fair since Sarah's death, but when Lily begged to attend, and Kate gently suggested it might be good for all of them to enjoy a day of leisure, he found himself agreeing. The fairgrounds were set up in a large meadow just outside town, with colorful tents, livestock pens, and a small arena for horse races and rodeo events. Lily was beside herself with excitement, pulling Kate from one attraction to another while Finn followed at a more measured pace, nodding to acquaintances and occasionally stopping to discuss business with fellow ranchers. "Finn Blackwood, as I live and breathe," a familiar voice called out as Finn waited for Kate and Lily to emerge from a tent displaying quilts and needlework. "Didn't expect to see you here." Finn turned to find Ben Cooper, his nearest neighbor and one of the few people who had continued to check on him even when Finn had made it clear he wanted to be left alone. "Ben," he greeted with a nod. "Good to see you." Ben's gaze shifted to where Kate and Lily were now approaching, the little girl clutching a small rag doll she had apparently persuaded her mother to buy. "So the rumors are true," Ben said with a knowing smile. "You've got yourself a housekeeper, and maybe something more." "It's not like that," Finn said quickly, though he felt a flush creeping up his neck. "Mrs. Reed works for me, that's all." Ben raised an eyebrow but didn't argue the point. "If you say so. But it's good to see you out and about again, whatever the reason." Before Finn could respond, Kate and Lily reached them. "Mr. Blackwood, Lily has something she'd like to ask you," Kate said, gently nudging her daughter forward. Lily looked up at Finn with hopeful eyes. "Can we see the pony rides, please? Mama says it's okay if you say it's okay." Finn couldn't help but smile at the child's earnest request. "I think that can be arranged." Ben watched this exchange with undisguised interest before Kate noticed him and extended her hand. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Katherine Reed." "Ben Cooper, madam. I own the Double C Ranch, just over the ridge from Finn's place." Ben took her hand with a courtly bow that made Lily giggle. "It's a pleasure to meet the woman who's managed to drag our resident hermit back into society." Kate laughed, a sound that Finn had come to anticipate with surprising eagerness. "I'm not sure I can take credit for that. Mr. Blackwood has been very kind to my daughter and me, offering us work and shelter when we had nowhere else to go. Finn Blackwood kind." Ben teased, though his eyes were warm as he glanced at his friend. Wonders never cease. The four of them walked together toward the pony rides, with Lily skipping ahead and Ben regaling Kate with stories of the early days of Promise Creek. Finn found himself watching Kate, noting the animated way she listened to Ben's tales, the genuine interest in her questions, the gentle corrections when Lily's excitement threatened to become too boisterous. "She's a fine woman," Ben commented quietly when Kate and Lily were occupied with selecting a pony. "And that little girl's taken quite a shine to you." Finn didn't pretend to misunderstand. They both deserve better than a broken-down widower with too many ghosts. Ben considered this. Maybe. Or maybe what they need is exactly what you need: someone who understands loss, but hasn't let it define them. Before Finn could respond, Lily called out for him to watch as she mounted a small, dappled pony with Kate's help. Finn moved closer, offering encouragement as the child circled the small ring, her face alight with joy. When the ride ended, Lily insisted on showing Finn the blue ribbon the pony had won in yesterday's competition, drawing him into a serious discussion about the merits of different horse breeds. "She's going to be quite the horsewoman," Kate observed as they watched Lily pat the pony's neck with reverent care. "She reminds me of myself at that age," Finn admitted. "I was horse crazy from the time I could walk. My father thought I'd outgrow it. But you didn't," Kate said with a smile. "No, ended up building my life around them instead." The rest of the day passed in a pleasant blur of exhibits, competitions, and shared meals of fair food that left Lily's face sticky with candy and Finn's stomach fuller than it had been in months. As the afternoon waned, they found themselves at the edge of the dancing area where a small band was playing lively tunes for couples to dance to. "Dance with me, Mr. Finn," Lily requested, tugging at his hand. Finn hesitated, looking to Kate for guidance. "Is that all right?" Kate's expression softened. "Of course, if you don't mind." Finn allowed Lily to pull him into the cleared space, where he awkwardly held her hands as they moved in a simple circle to the music, the child standing on his boots to reach. Lily's delight was infectious, and Finn found himself smiling despite his self-consciousness. When the music changed to a slower waltz, Lily declared herself tired and ran off to watch a nearby puppet show, leaving Finn standing alone at the edge of the dance floor. He turned to find Kate watching him, her expression unreadable in the golden light of late afternoon. "Would you care to dance, Mrs. Reed?" he asked formally, extending his hand before he could reconsider. Kate hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I would, Mr. Blackwood." Leading her onto the dance floor, Finn was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. It had been so long since he had danced with anyone that he feared he had forgotten how. But as his hand settled respectfully at Kate's waist, and her free hand rested lightly on his shoulder, the familiar steps came back to him. Kate moved with natural grace, following his lead as they circled the floor. She was close enough that he could detect the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair, could feel the warmth of her through the layers of clothing that separated them. "You dance very well," Kate remarked, breaking the silence between them. "Sarah insisted I learn properly before our wedding," Finn said, the memory unexpectedly sweet rather than painful. "Said she wouldn't have her husband shuffling around like a bear with sore paws." Kate laughed softly. "She sounds like a woman who knew her mind." "She was," Finn agreed. After a moment he added, "I think you would have liked each other." The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise Kate, whose steps faltered momentarily before she recovered. "I think so too," she said quietly. They danced in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken understanding. When the music ended, Finn reluctantly released her, his hand lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary on hers. "Thank you for the dance," Kate said, her cheeks flushed from the exertion or perhaps something more. "The pleasure was mine," Finn replied, meaning it more sincerely than he had expected. As they collected a tired Lily and made their way back to the wagon for the journey home, Finn was conscious of a shift in his relationship with Kate. Something had changed between them today. Some barrier had lowered, though he couldn't quite name what had replaced it. The ride home was quiet, with Lily falling asleep almost immediately, nestled between them on the wagon seat. In the darkness, Finn was acutely aware of Kate beside him, of the occasional brush of her shoulder against his as the wagon jolted over ruts in the road. "I had a wonderful time today," Kate said softly as the lights of the ranch came into view. "Thank you for taking us." "I did too," Finn admitted, "more than I expected to." When they reached the ranch, Finn carefully lifted the sleeping Lily from the wagon, cradling her against his chest as he followed Kate to the cabin. The child stirred but didn't wake, her small body trusting and warm in his arms. As he laid her on her bed, Finn was struck by a sudden, fierce protectiveness that caught him off guard. Kate thanked him with a whispered goodnight, and Finn made his way back to the main house, his thoughts in turmoil. For the first time since Sarah's death, he was beginning to imagine a future that wasn't defined solely by loss and loneliness. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. September arrived with cooler nights and the promise of autumn in the air. The ranch was busy with preparations for winter, repairing outbuildings, laying in firewood, and making sure the cattle were healthy before the harsh Wyoming winter set in. Kate took on additional responsibilities, preserving vegetables from the garden and mending winter clothing for Finn and the hands. One crisp morning, as Finn was reviewing the accounts in his study, Kate knocked tentatively at the door. "May I speak with you a moment?" she asked, her expression unusually serious. "Of course," Finn said, setting aside his ledger. "Is something wrong?" Kate entered the room but remained standing, her hands clasped tightly before her. "Not wrong exactly, but I've been offered a position at the school in town. They need a teacher's assistant, and with my education." Finn felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. "You're leaving?" "I haven't decided yet," Kate said quickly. "The position wouldn't start until after harvest. I wanted to discuss it with you first, given our arrangement." Finn struggled to keep his expression neutral, though his mind was racing with implications. Kate and Lily living in town, no longer part of his daily life. The house empty and silent once more, the thought was unexpectedly painful. "It's a good opportunity," he managed to say. "Teaching would suit you." "Yes, I think it would," Kate agreed, studying his face as if searching for something. "But I've been very happy here, Finn. Lily loves the ranch and you've been more than generous to us." "But the position would offer more security," Finn concluded for her. "A more respectable situation for a widow with a child." Kate's cheeks colored slightly. "Some in town have commented on the unconventional nature of our arrangement, not that I care much for gossip, but for Lily's sake." Finn understood all too well. A widow living on a bachelor's ranch, regardless of the separate accommodations and the employment relationship, was bound to raise eyebrows in a small community like Promise Creek. "You should take the position," he said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. "It would be better for you and Lily in the long run." Kate's expression fell slightly, though she quickly masked it. "I see." Well, as I said, it wouldn't begin until after harvest. I wouldn't leave you short-handed before then. I appreciate that, Finn said stiffly, unable to express the tumult of emotions her announcement had triggered. Kate hesitated, as if waiting for him to say more, then nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Finn, if there were other considerations that might affect my decision, I would want to know about them. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities that Finn wasn't sure he was ready to acknowledge. I wouldn't want to hold you back from what's best for you and Lily, he finally said, taking refuge in generalities. Kate's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, thank you for understanding. After she left, Finn sat motionless at his desk, staring at the ledger without seeing it. The prospect of Kate and Lily leaving had shaken him more deeply than he had expected, forcing him to confront feelings he had been carefully avoiding. The following days were strained, with Finn retreating into work and Kate maintaining a polite distance that felt colder than outright anger would have. Lily, sensitive to the change in atmosphere, became unusually subdued, watching the adults with worried eyes. It was Lily who finally broke the impasse, approaching Finn one evening as he sat alone on the porch, watching the sunset. "Are you mad at Mama?" she asked, climbing onto the chair beside him without invitation. Finn was startled by the direct question. "No, of course not. Why would you think that?" Lily shrugged, swinging her legs. "You don't talk at dinner anymore, and Mama looks sad when you're not looking." The child's perception was unnervingly accurate. "Your Mama and I just have a lot on our minds," Finn explained carefully. "Grown-up things." Lily considered this. "Is it because we might move to town?" "I don't want to move. I like it here with you and the horses and Jake and everybody." Her words struck Finn like a physical blow. Sometimes people have to do things they don't want to do because it's for the best in the long run. "That's what Mama said," Lily replied with a frown, "but I don't think she wants to go either. She cried last night when she thought I was asleep." The image of Kate crying alone in their cabin sent a shaft of pain through Finn's chest. "Lily, does your Mama seem happy here? At the ranch, I mean." Lily nodded emphatically. "She sings when she's cooking. She never used to sing before we came here, and she smiles more, especially when you're around." Finn absorbed this information, wondering if the child was simply seeing what she wanted to see or if there was truth in her observations. "Lily, do you remember your father at all?" The little girl shook her head. "Mama says he died when I was a baby, but she shows me his picture sometimes and tells me stories about him. And would you? Would it bother you if your Mama ever cared for someone else? Not to replace your father, but—" Lily's face scrunched in thought. "Mama says love isn't like a cup that gets emptied. It's like a candle that can light other candles without getting smaller." The simple wisdom in the child's words struck Finn deeply. Before he could respond, Kate's voice called from the doorway. "Lily, I've been looking everywhere for you. It's nearly bedtime." Kate appeared on the porch, her expression shifting from relief to wariness when she saw her daughter sitting with Finn. "I'm sorry if she was bothering you." "She wasn't," Finn assured her. "We were having a good talk, weren't we, Lily?" The child nodded solemnly. "I was telling Mr. Finn about candles." Kate's eyes widened slightly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I see. Well, it's still time for bed. Say good night to Mr. Blackwood." "Good night, Mr. Finn," Lily said, sliding off the chair. Before leaving, she whispered loudly enough for both adults to hear. "Remember what I said about Mama singing." After Lily had scampered inside, Kate lingered awkwardly on the porch. "I apologize if she was asking personal questions. She's at an age where curiosity often overrides manners." "She's a wonderful child, Kate," Finn said sincerely. "You've raised her well." Kate's expression softened. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you." A silence fell between them, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Finn gathered his courage. "Kate, about the teaching position. I think you should consider all your options before making a decision." Kate's gaze sharpened. "What do you mean?" Finn stood, moving closer to her. "I mean that there might be other considerations that would make staying at the ranch a viable option for you and Lily." Kate's breath caught audibly. Such as the fact that I've grown very fond of both of you," Finn said, the words coming easier than he had expected. "More than fond, if I'm being honest." Kate's eyes searched his face. "Finn, are you saying what I think you're saying?" I'm saying that the thought of you and Lily leaving has made me realize how much you've both come to mean to me, Finn continued, his heart pounding in his chest. I know it's only been a few months, and I understand if you don't feel the same way, but I do, Kate interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. Feel the same way, that is, but I didn't think. After Sarah, I wasn't sure if you would ever. Neither was I, Finn admitted, taking another step toward her. I swore I'd never love again after losing her. The pain was too great, the risk too high. But then you and Lily came along, and somehow, without my noticing, you found your way past all those barriers I'd built. Kate's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I never intended to fall in love with you, Finn Blackwood. It wasn't part of my plan at all. I reckon the best things in life rarely are planned, Finn said, reaching out to take her hand. Kate, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want you and Lily to be part of it, not as my housekeeper, but as. As what? Kate prompted when he hesitated. As my wife, if you'll have me, Finn said, the words feeling right as soon as they left his mouth. I love you, Katherine Reed, you and Lily both. A tear slipped down Kate's cheek as she squeezed his hand. Are you certain? I wouldn't want you to offer marriage out of a sense of obligation or to prevent scandal, or Finn silenced her concerns by gently placing his free hand against her cheek. I'm offering because the thought of waking up each morning knowing you're here, of watching Lily grow up, of building a life together, it makes me happier than I ever thought I could be again. Kate's smile was radiant through her tears. Then yes, Finn Blackwood, I will marry you. Finn's heart soared at her words. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss. Kate responded immediately, her hand coming up to rest against his chest as she returned the kiss with a sweetness that made his knees weak. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Kate laughed softly. Well, I suppose I should decline the teaching position. I suppose you should, Finn agreed, unable to stop smiling, though you could still teach Lily here, and any other children that might come along. Kate's eyes widened at the implication, then softened with emotion. I would like that very much. From inside the house came a small squeal of delight, followed by the rapid patter of small feet retreating. Kate pressed her forehead against Finn's chest with a groan. It seems we had an audience. Finn chuckled, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. I reckon Lily approves at least. She adores you, Kate confirmed, looking up at him. Almost as much as I do. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Finn held Kate close, marveling at the unexpected gift life had given him. He had sworn he would never love again, had been certain that part of him had died with Sarah. Yet here he was, his heart full to bursting with love for the woman in his arms and the child who had accepted him so readily. Later, after Kate had returned to the cabin to put an excited Lily to bed with promises of a long talk in the morning, Finn stood at Sarah's grave for the first time in months. The wooden cross stood straight against the backdrop of mountains, the wildflowers he had planted in the spring nodding gently in the evening breeze. I think you'd approve, Sarah, he said quietly. Kate's not replacing you, no one ever could. But she's helped me remember how to live again, how to open my heart, and Lily, she's something special, you would have loved her. A warm breeze stirred the grass around the grave, and Finn felt, for the first time since Sarah's death, a sense of peace settle over him. The pain of losing her would always be part of him, but it no longer defined him. There was room in his heart for that grief alongside the joy of his love for Kate and Lily. The wedding took place on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees glowing gold against the blue Wyoming sky. The entire town of Promise Creek turned out for the occasion, filling the small church to capacity. Reverend Taylor officiated, his kind face beaming as he pronounced Finn and Kate husband and wife. Lily, resplendent in a new dress sewn by Mrs. Hanson, stood proudly beside her mother, clutching a small bouquet of autumn flowers and beaming as Finn knelt down after the ceremony to place a small silver locket around her neck. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find a miniature portrait of her father on one side. "A reminder that you carry those you love with you always," Finn explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Your father will always be a part of you, Lily. And now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to be a part of your life too. Lily's response was to throw her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. Does this mean I can call you Papa now? She whispered in his ear. Finn's heart swelled nearly to bursting. I would be honored, he whispered back. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and lanterns hung from tree branches. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and if some noticed that the usually reserved Finn Blackwood couldn't seem to stop smiling, or that he kept his new wife's hand firmly clasped in his whenever possible, no one commented on the transformation. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Finn found himself standing on the porch of what was now truly his home again, watching as Kate tucked an exhausted Lily into bed in what would be the child's new room in the main house. She's finally asleep, Kate said as she joined him on the porch, slipping her arm around his waist. Too much excitement and cake, I'm afraid. Finn pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender in her hair. It was a perfect day. It was, Kate agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. Though I still can't quite believe it's real. A year ago, I never would have imagined finding happiness again, especially not here in Wyoming. Life has a way of surprising us, Finn said, thinking of how close he had come to turning her away that first day, how different their lives might have been if he had. Kate turned in his arms to face him, her eyes luminous in the twilight. I love you, Finn Blackwood. Thank you for taking a chance on us. Finn lowered his mouth to hers in a tender kiss. Thank you for helping me find my way back to life, Kate Blackwood. As they stood together on the porch of their home, the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, Finn reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. He had buried his heart alongside his wife, certain that he would never love again. Yet fate, or perhaps something more divine, had sent Katherine Reed and her daughter into his life, showing him that even the deepest wounds could heal, that love could bloom again from the ashes of loss. The pain of the past would always be with him, a shadow that occasionally darkened the brightest days. But now that shadow was balanced by the light of Kate's love and Lily's laughter, by the promise of a future filled with joy he had once thought forever beyond his reach. Spring came again to Promise Creek, bringing with it new life and renewal. The ranch flourished under Finn and Kate's combined care, with new calves dotting the pastures and the garden expanding under Kate's green thumb. Lily, now 6 and attending the local school, had taken to ranch life with enthusiasm, trailing after Finn whenever he would allow it, and developing a remarkable affinity for horses that confirmed his suspicion that she was, indeed, much like him at that age. On a particularly fine May morning, Finn awoke to find Kate's side of the bed empty. Concerned, he dressed quickly and made his way to the kitchen, only to find it deserted as well. A half-prepared breakfast sat on the counter, abandoned mid-task. Worry rising in his throat, Finn stepped onto the porch, scanning the yard for any sign of his wife. He spotted her finally, a lone figure standing beside Sarah's grave on the distant hillside. The sight stopped him cold. In the 7 months since their wedding, Kate had always been respectful of his past, never intruding on his private moments of remembrance, never showing any sign of jealousy toward the woman who had come before her. Finn made his way up the hill, his mind racing with possible explanations for Kate's uncharacteristic behavior. As he approached, he could see that she had placed fresh wildflowers on the grave, the colorful blooms bright against the weathered wood of the cross. Kate. He called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and Finn was surprised to see not sadness but a serene smile on her face. Good morning, she said, reaching out a hand to him. I hope you weren't worried when you found me gone. A little, Finn admitted, taking her hand and joining her beside the grave. Is everything all right? Kate nodded, her eyes clear and bright in the morning sunlight. Everything is perfect, actually. I wanted to talk to Sarah, to thank her. Finn's confusion must have shown on his face, for Kate continued, her voice gentle. To thank her for loving you first, for helping make you the man you are, and to promise her that I'll always cherish that part of your heart that will always be hers. Emotion welled in Finn's throat, making speech impossible for a moment. When he could finally speak, his voice was rough with feeling. What did I do to deserve you, Kate Blackwood? Kate's smile widened, a hint of mischief entering her eyes. I've been asking myself the same question lately. Especially considering what I came up here to tell Sarah and you this morning. And what's that? Finn asked, suddenly aware of a new quality in Kate's expression, a radiance that seemed to come from within. Kate took his hand and placed it gently against her still flat stomach. That our family is growing. I'm with child Finn, due in December according to my calculations. The world seemed to stop for a heartbeat as Finn absorbed her words. A child. Their child. Joy, swift and overwhelming, flooded through him, followed immediately by a surge of fear so intense it nearly buckled his knees. Kate, ever perceptive, saw the conflicting emotions cross his face. I know you're afraid, she said softly. After what happened with Sarah, I am too a little. But Finn, this is a new beginning, a new chapter in our story. Finn pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of her condition even though there was no outward sign of it yet. A new chapter, he repeated, the words feeling right, not replacing what came before but adding to it. Exactly, Kate said, nestling against his chest. And I have a feeling Sarah would be happy for us. As if in response, a gentle breeze stirred the wildflowers on the grave, sending their sweet scent wafting up to where Finn and Kate stood. In that moment, Finn felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. He had buried his heart on this hillside, certain he would never love again. Now he stood in the same spot, his heart full to overflowing with love for the woman in his arms, for Lily who had captured his heart with her innocent trust, and for the new life growing beneath his hand. She would be, Finn agreed, pressing a kiss to Kate's hair. And so am I, Kate. So incredibly happy. Hand in hand, they made their way back down the hill toward the house where Lily would soon be waking, eager to start another day on the ranch she now called home. The sun climbed higher in the clear Wyoming sky, casting long shadows behind them and illuminating the path ahead, a path they would walk together, whatever joys and sorrows it might hold. Finn Blackwood had sworn he would never love again after burying his wife. But fate, it seemed, had other plans that included a widow with a child taking his hand and leading him back to life, back to love, back to the realization that the heart, once broken, could not only heal but grow larger, stronger, and more capable of love than ever before. And for that unexpected gift, he would be forever grateful.